The first resolution is honoring Fritzie Fritzshall, and I believe that we have in the box members of her family, Steve Fritzshall, the son, is that correct? And as well as Howard Swibel of the Illinois Holocaust Museum. Thank you all for being here. The chair recognizes Alderman Silverstein.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm proud to stand in support of this resolution. Our city lost a major voice in the fight against bigotry and hatred with the passing of Frieda Fritzie Fritzshall, president of the Illinois Holocaust Museum and lifelong crusader for social justice. A Holocaust survivor herself, she overcame the atrocities of Auschwitz and went on to dedicate her life to making this world a better place. First, I would like to recognize Fritzie's son, Stephen, who is with us here today, as you heard. Your mother's dedication towards ending anti-Semitism and the refugee crisis inspired people all over the world to become upstanders instead of bystanders and join her in the fight against hatred and prejudice. She was born Fritzie Weiss in 1929 in pre-war Czechoslovakia. When the Nazis invaded, she was deported together with her mother and two brothers to the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. She was only 13 years old at the time. But upon the advice of a stranger, she lined up with the 15-year-olds and truly believes that that is what saved her life. Her mother and brothers were murdered. Fritzie endured a year in Auschwitz and a related Nazi camp where she performed slave labor in a factory. In 1945, she was liberated by the Soviet army after escaping into a nearby forest during a death march. After the war, Fritzie came to Skokie, Illinois, and reunited with her father. She married Norman Fritzshall, a US veteran of World War II, who had been a prisoner of war in the Pacific, and together they built a life in the Chicagoland area. Fritzie devoted her life to combating hatred and prejudice, telling her harrowing story of survival and speaking out to make our world a better place. She joined with other survivors to establish the Holocaust Memorial Foundation of Illinois in 1981 in response to an attempt to neo-Nazis to march through the street of Skokie. She also helped convince Governor James Thompson to sign the Holocaust education mandate into law, making Illinois the first state in the country to require the teaching of the Holocaust in all public schools. In 2009, the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center opened in Skokie, bringing a world-class educational institution to the Chicagoland area. Fritzie served as its president since 2010. Under her leadership, the museum grew to inspire more than 280,000 individuals annually and introduced interactive 3D holograms of survivors as a way to preserve their stories for generations to come. Fritzie fulfilled her life goal. She left the world a far better place than she found it. She is survived by her son, Stephen, daughter-in-law, Hinda, grandsons, Scott and Andy, and many other family members and friends. She had a tremendous impact on me and was truly an inspiration for the entire population of the 50th Ward and everyone in Chicago who believes in her cause. It is my great privilege to co-sponsor this resolution honoring Frieda Fritzie Fritzshall, and I pray that it causes more people to visit the Holocaust Museum, hear her story, interact with her hologram, and learn from her life. May her memory be for a blessing. Thank you.
Alderman Silverstein, the chair recognizes. The chair recognizes Alderman Smith.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I am a Jew, and many members of my family are unknown to me. When we came over in 1908, members of my family, many were left behind, and even a couple came and went back because they were not comfortable in the new world and were basically never heard from again. I'm so honored by the work that Fritzie has done, because many people, many people in this room have family that they did not know what happened to them. They were lost by brutality, hundreds of years ago in our own country, and didn't have the means of communication that we have today to preserve their stories and say never again. And many members of my family and many, many other Jewish families never knew their past, because when people were freed from the Holocaust, they came to America and said, I'm never going to think about this again. And you can imagine why they didn't, because those events can overshadow you and kill you inside and prevent you from having a family. But Fritzie and some other brave people like her said, no, we are going to perform a higher calling. We are going to remember. And this is the lesson that her work has done, is by helping people know that these things actually happen to people. And I know they actually happen to people. My brother-in-law went back to Hungary before the pandemic and discovered that both his grandparents were on a forced march, a death march there. And their village and his family was wiped out. And fortunately, his father managed to escape to Palestine. But what we know here, and what the Holocaust Museum and those marchers in Skokie and what Fritzie did, is taught us that the way to make sure things never happen again is to keep telling people what they experienced and what they knew. And that is the way to reconciliation. And that is the way to make sure that we actually can make the future better. So I want to thank Fritzie for whatever she did, for everything that she did. And also echo my co-alderman Silverstein, and is encouraging people to go to the Holocaust Museum, because that is how we learn together to avoid these horrible events in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Smith. The chair recognizes Alderman Raboyes.
Thank you, Madam President. I too stand in support of this resolution. I want to thank my colleague from the 50th Ward for bringing this matter here today. I never had the pleasure of meeting Frieda, but I can tell you that several years ago, my colleague, Chairman Talaferro, and I visited Auschwitz. And I can tell you that it's unbelievable what we saw. It was difficult for us to continue our journey when we were in Poland and visiting Auschwitz. And the sad part about this is that the numbers are not exact on how many lives were lost, how many Jewish lives were lost, but I know it's in excess of 6 million people and family members. The crimes against humanity that were committed here were atrocious, and we must never forget. Auschwitz was a combination of several camps and sub-camps. There were concentration camps, death camps, and labor camps. I cannot imagine the condition and the horror this 13-year-old Frieda went through, had to endure, but endured she did, by the grace of an unknown man who whispered to her, "Lie about your age." She was sent to a slave labor camp instead of death. Years later, she managed to escape. Thank God she did. She was one of the lucky ones, but so are we. Due to her decision to talk about her own experiences and her dedication to establish the Holocaust Memorial Foundation and educate us all, and she did educate us all by sharing not only her story, but those of us who also survived. We can learn from history to never repeat crimes against humanity. We should never hate those who are different from us. Let us not forget. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Alderman Raboyes. The chair recognizes Alderman Mitz.
Thank you, Madam President. I too like to rise in support of this resolution. I thank my colleague Alderman Silverstein for even asking me to be a co-sponsor. And when I saw the resolution, right away I said yes. And let me tell you why, because I learned something that I did not even know. And I think that the world sometimes don't know what people go through, but you learn. Myself and Alderman Michelle Harris had an opportunity some years back to visit Israel. And it was my first time visiting the Holocaust Museum. It just blew my mind because I didn't even know the story. But going through on that tour, seeing how people were literally taken one by one and shot them and just put them in a ditch. The boots, the uniforms, and all these officers taking little kids. I mean, it was just so many. And I just didn't realize that that took place in the world. So it was an eye-opener to say, you don't know until the shoe is on your feet. You just don't know. So don't pass judgment. Just know that we are all human beings put on this earth, and we should all learn to educate ourselves if we don't know about history. And that was a history lesson for me. I thank you for having the museum, because I never would have known that story. And grateful for someone who stood up and wanted to pass it on through generation so that they would know what took place long before many of us was born. So thank you all. Thank the family for being here in honor of Ms. Fritzie, and continue to carry on her legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Mitz. The chair recognizes Alderman Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too rise, and I'm honored to be a co-sponsor on this resolution. I want to thank my colleague, Alderman Silverstein, for inviting me to be a part of this. To Stephen and his family, to Fritzie's family, your mom, your grandmother was a true inspiration. Taking a tragic experience and turning that into a life commitment to fighting bigotry and hatred, and inspiring many more to do the same. On behalf of the residents of the 11th Ward, again, I'm honored to be a part of this resolution, and I wish all of you well, and thank you for allowing Fritzie to be part of a much larger family than just yours. And her efforts have reached many, many more, and hopefully we can all continue to fight bigotry and hatred that your mom inspired many to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Thompson. The chair recognizes Alderman Kaplan.
Thank you, Madam President. I too rise and support this resolution. In 1982, I traveled to Israel and I saw the Holocaust Museum, and it just blew me away. I just couldn't believe what I saw. And soon afterwards, a few months later, I joined the Franciscan order. I was a Franciscan monk in Detroit, and I got in trouble because I would go to the Jewish community center there and to do Israeli folk dance. And I became friends with Sonny Siegel. Sonny Siegel was about 3 years old when she and her entire family went to Auschwitz. Her family Hitler promised not to gas them because she was born in Great Britain, and that's what saved her life. My father-in-law served in World War II, and he had the job of helping to liberate many of the Auschwitz people, camp survivors. And the thing he talked about was many of them couldn't get out of bed. they were so weak. I always believed that this could never happen again. And I've come to believe, starting in 2016, that it can. And that's why this story has to be told over and over and over again. So thank you so much. Thank you, Madam President.
Alderman Kappelman, the chair recognizes Alderman Osterman.
Thank you, Madam President. I too want to rise in support of this and honor your mom and family, Fritzie Fritzshall. And I want to commend Alderwoman Silverstein for bringing this forward to us. I think, as Alderman Kappelman said, the work of reminding people about the tragedies of the Holocaust is something that's present with us today. And in addition to the Holocaust Museum, she helped pass a state law that taught Illinois students about the tragedies of the Holocaust. When we had our budget hearing, Human Relations Commission talked this last year about the increased times, increased cases of anti-Semitism, hatred that goes on against our Jewish brothers and sisters. So the work that she started, the vision that she had working with other people, continues to put this important work in the forefront. There are people that want to use every opportunity to misinform and to spread hate, and her work, her life's legacy is to counteract that with good and to inform us all to be watchful on how we can fight hate together with love. So she will stay with us and her work will carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Osterman. Any other members of the body who wish to speak to this resolution? I will just say that I join the members of this body and commend Alderman Silverstein in bringing this resolution forward. Unfortunately, we know that anti-Semitism is alive in our world, as is xenophobia and racism and other forms of hate. The work that Frieda Fritzshall and others have done to not only help us remember the horrors of the genocide, of the Holocaust, but also serving as an opportunity for healing, for bringing communities together. That is the work that we all must be about. We're seeing a time where the survivors who have come to this country are now passing. But I hope that we continue to lift up their legacy by living a life that is worthy of their sacrifice, but also to make sure that we truly never forget. I personally believe that an attack on the Jewish community is an attack on me as a resident and as a neighbor, as a Black woman, as a lesbian. I know what hate looks like. And I want to make sure that we are unified in our support of all communities that are the victims of hate in our city and across our country. I want to thank and commend the Illinois Holocaust Museum. The work that you do is just tremendous. And particularly the work where you have memorialized the testimonies of Holocaust survivors so that all of us, for generations to come, will be able to understand in their words, feeling their passion, their emotion, the experience of having survived what is only can be characterized as one of the most horrific atrocities known to man. So I want to thank you for the work and continuing work and urge members of the body and members of the public to support the work of the Holocaust Museum. Again, I want to thank you, Alderman Silverstein, and also members of the Jewish community here in our city, particularly our Orthodox community, who has endured so much, and so much pain. An attack anywhere in the world resonates here deeply. I once spoke to somebody in the Orthodox community here following an attack that happened in California. And his words have stayed with me to this day. I reached out to find out how they were doing. He said, I never thought that I'd feel like the hunted. I never thought that when I was in synagogue, humbling myself before my God, that I have to worry about the next person walking down the aisle. That unfortunately is a reality of way too many people here and across the nation and across our world. So let us never forget. Alderman Mitchell.
Madam President, I request adoption of the resolution, pardon me, by resolution by rising vote.
Ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.